Welcome to Nature's Symphony, the show where we explore the natural world and the incredible efforts to protect it.
I'm Joumana, your second host, and Maryam, your main host for this session. Today we're honored to have Chloe Evans with us. Chloe Evans is a owner of a organization for conservation who has dedicated their life to protecting endangered species. Welcome, Chloe Evans.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to start, can you both introduce yourself to our listeners? Like, what's your background and what's your expertise in the world of conservation?
Sure. So my name is Chloe Evans. I'm 28 years old. I'm originally from the United Kingdom, but I've lived and worked in the UAE for just over 7 years. I am the founder and the CEO of an organization called Wild Tracks. Our mission is to improve conservation efforts globally. Predominantly, we're working in Africa. We work with endangered wildlife and also communities to try and protect our planet.
It's inspiring to hear about your journey. Could you share a bit more about what led you into the field of endangered species conservation? Was there a particular moment or experience that sparked your passion?
Yeah, so when I was young, I used to want to be a vet. But unfortunately, fortunately, went down the corporate route. Um, Actually, when I graduated university, I had my first trip to the African continent, which was to South Africa. Here, I was a volunteer for 3 weeks at Shamwari Game Reserve and at Born Free. And then more recently, in March 2023, I had another opportunity to visit South Africa. And there I got the opportunity to meet with a local South African vet who was actually doing some
Yeah.
lioness collaring.
Yeah.
And he also needed to relocate 2 lions. So this point was, I would say, my butterfly effect, the moment in my career where I decided I wanted to dedicate my experiences and my skills to help conserve endangered species. Um, and yeah, since then I wrote my business plan on the
Yeah.
plane back, and ever since I've been working in the field.
That's really inspiring. Yeah, that's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Okay, great. For listeners who might not know, what does it mean for a species to be endangered?
Yeah, so essentially it means that it's at threat of going extinct. I mean, critically endangered is one of the most severe categories on the IUCN list, which is like the classification governing body for endangered species. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm sure some of your listeners will know specifically about polar bears, pandas, black rhino, and these are all unfortunately at risk of going extinct, which means that we won't have them anymore for, on our planet for people to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like so what are some of the most common reasons that species are becoming endangered? Like, are there any trends that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, like the common ones are obviously climate change, habitat loss. There's also human wildlife conflict, humans exploiting animals, especially for entertainment purposes. And then, of course, there's the illegal trade, whether that's organized syndicate crime or
Uh,
just
yeah.
poaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say are the top three threats to biodiversity today, and how do these specifically affect endangered species in general?
In terms of top three, it's quite difficult to say because I think that it's quite species specific and also it's quite geographically specific.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're talking, about colder climates, it's more about climate change. Obviously, the ice caps are melting, threats to polar bears, things like that. For the animals that I mainly work with, which is mainly Southern Africa, I would say habitat loss. You can take lions as an example for this. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
there's not enough lions, but also there are too many of them for the wild land that it's available. So this is causing a big problem. And then second, I would say is poaching. So many animals are killed for particular body parts. Take a
Yeah.
rhino, for example, it's killed for its horn. Um, and then lastly, I'd say probably human wildlife conflict, which is also linked to habitat loss.
Yeah. So like we all know about climate change. Climate change is a big debate and huge topic right now. Like, how's it impacting endangered species? Are there any effects that might surprise people?
Yeah, I would say a lot of people, or climate change is kind of a buzzword, and a lot of people just think that it kind of affects an animal, but it actually affects like a whole ecosystem. I think that's what's surprising. And I think what people don't tend to
Yeah.
understand as much are like the smaller creatures, how impactful they are in an ecosystem. And like the loss of, say, bees or insects
Yeah.
can be catastrophic to those. Um, Also, what people are maybe unaware of are things like, the huge droughts that they're having across Africa. Many species are dying of thirst, lack of food. You've got
Yeah.
extreme weather patterns, which affects like the migration of birds. So I think what people think of with climate change is like less holistic and more of an isolation. Like, yes, it's a problem and it's affecting animals, but they don't think how catastrophic that is for both humans, wildlife, the planet, and everything that makes us up.
Yeah, like if it affects, for example, if it affects one ecosystem, then it'll affect everything around it, like the human civilizations around it and the other ecosystems around it. So like climate change
Exactly.
is the global threat. It isn't just
Exactly.
limited to one species or area.
I agree. So I think another issue is like the human wildlife conflict, like you mentioned. So can you like share an example of how this conflict plays out in real life and like what we can do to protect both people and wildlife in these situations?
Yeah, so human wildlife conflict is actually a big part of, or let's say a big problem that we're trying to solve in Wild Tracks as an organization. So I always say to people that conservation doesn't happen without people, and human wildlife conflict is a problem. To give an example, I can use the lion one again. So there's not enough wild land for the population of lions to
Yeah.
exist. Um, and even leopards, elephants, they start encroaching on human spaces because human spaces or humans have encroached on wild spaces. So essentially, especially with climate change, habitat loss, you'll often find that problem species like elephants, they're very destructive. They will raid farms looking for food because there isn't enough food in the area they've got. Leopards will steal cattle.
Mhm.
And it's there's no one to blame. We completely understand a human point of view. This is their livelihood. We need to protect that. And we also understand that there's not enough land for the animals. So we really work on, with local schools and communities to try and find
Yeah.
resolutions, try and raise awareness, instill a mindset. And a lot of it is about awareness, education, and also employment opportunities. And hopefully,
Yeah. So like
this will improve.
it is possible to have both a solution that can benefit humans and benefit wildlife. Is that correct? Like
Definitely.
there is a solution to balancing out both parts of the spectrum.
Definitely. I'm the type of mindset,
Mm.
there's always a solution for everything. It might not be clear
Yeah.
to us right now, and we might need to do some iterations, but I'm a believer that we can coexist and we should, we should do this because it's the right thing to
Yeah.
do. We're no more deserving of this planet than the
Yeah.
wildlife around us.
Yep.
So like
Yeah, I
it's very
completely
easy to
agree
feel
with you.
yeah. So like it's very easy to like feel overwhelmed as like we're hearing all of these terrible stories about species getting extinct and all of that. But conservation has had some like amazing success stories. Can you like share one where a species was saved or brought back from like critically endangered? Like what were the key factors that made their efforts so successful?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about rhinos, just because it's the one that I'm
Yeah.
most familiar with.
Yeah.
But just to mention here, because I think it's a really nice one since we're based in the UAE. But the Arabian oryx is one of the most successful conservation stories there are. So for your listeners, they should definitely do some research and check it out if they're interested. But in terms of rhinos, so I would say the methodology of dehorning, it is a little bit controversial, but we have seen amazing success. Of course, sometimes there is still poaching on a dehorned rhino,
Yeah.
but that just
Yeah.
shows the depravity of the situation. But generally speaking, the scientific journals and studies that have been done show that there's been a huge success in preventing poaching through dehorning. And also, um, it doesn't affect the social interactions of the rhino too significantly. So it's a really good one. Now, of course, it has to be in combination with other solutions like anti-poaching units, canine units, technology. But it's a good one. I don't know if you want me to explain what a dehorning is. I don't know if your listeners are aware, if that will help.
No, that will. You can explain it.
Okay, so basically, a rhino's horn is made of keratin, which is the same material as our fingernails and our hair. So it grows back. It's like a big toenail. And unfortunately, rhinos are endangered because they're being killed for this horn. And the reason is per kilogram, it sells for around 100,000 US dollars on the black market. It is completely illegal. And it doesn't mean anything. It's, as I said, the same material as a fingernail. And a rhino horn can get up to 6 kg. So you can imagine it's around,
Oh,
half a
yeah.
million US dollars. It's a lot
Yeah.
of money. So basically what we do with the dehorning is we work with a conservation team, which consists of the reserve manager, a helicopter pilot, and a veterinarian. And we basically dart the rhino so it's sedated. We put a blindfold and earplugs in to make sure that it reduces the stress. And then we take a chainsaw, which sounds barbaric, but it's actually the quickest and simplest way, most efficient way to remove the horn. And what we're doing is we're not completely removing it. We're cutting down to the growth plate, which is the same as our nail bed. So it's got no feelings.
Yeah.
And we're trimming it off. So every 12 to 15 months, we'll have to redo the process because the rhino horn will grow back. So it's a really nice solution because the rhino isn't losing its horn. But for the 12 months, whilst it's growing, it's a significant amount of horn removed that it doesn't become a very good target for poaching. Because if they do get caught, the poachers, it's not worth the amount they can get. And as I said, it still happens. But it's definitely something we should be celebrating as a success story. And I hope that in time to come, we'll get more advanced solutions. But yeah, that's a dehorning.
Yes, that's very inspiring. I think it really helps to like listen to these inspiring stories that give us hope that we are capable of conserving instead of destroying the environment. So I think that's really inspiring.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's like a really like innovative way. So speaking of innovation, are there any like surprising or like innovative methods being used right now in conservation efforts?
Yeah, so rhino dehorning, I would say, is pretty innovative in itself. But to give another example is tracking collars. So we use technology to basically locate where an animal is. So this is a really good tool to prevent human-wildlife conflict. So what we do is, again, we will sedate the animal and then we'll put on a tracking collar. And this will last up to around 2 years. And what we can do with this is we can get live data to see exactly where that animal is. So if an elephant herd looks like it's going to be breaking fence lines and going into a human zone, and therefore be at risk of being shot, we can prevent this before it happens. We can also collect a lot of data on the animal, their patterns, what they eat, how they move. And of course, data helps us protect them. The more we know about them, the more we're able to put mitigating initiatives in place to help protect them. So yeah, I would say that one's quite innovative as well.
Yeah, indeed it is. So for our listeners who may not have like a scientific background or like any professionalism in this field, like how can they get involved in conservation efforts?
Maybe I'm a bit biased on this one, but I would say one of them is to come on our trips. So Wild Tracks create, let's say, holiday packages for schools, for universities, for corporates, and also for your general public that have no understanding, but just have a passion to have a purposeful holiday. So what we do is we use the money from the tourism trips and we fund some of the initiatives I've just mentioned. So rhino dehornings, collar rings. And in return, our guests get to be part of the experience with the vets, with the helicopter pilot. They get to see the animals up close. They get to be involved in the hands-on experience. I myself, I don't have a background in conservation. I studied history. I work in advanced technology. But I had such a passion. And I think this just goes to show that if you are passionate And if you're willing to put the hard work in, there is definitely an opportunity for you, even if you don't have the scientific background or the qualifications, to do good and to start today to make an impact.
That is so true. Yeah, that is
Yeah,
so
I
true.
completely agree with that because I don't think you need like a special like scientific background to like make a difference. And I would definitely want to like go on one of those trips you talked about. It sounds so yeah, this sounds so like interesting, and I just want to experience what it's like.
You're more than welcome.
Yeah, so maybe one day. And finally, looking at the big picture, what do you think is the most urgent action we need to take globally to protect endangered species over the next decade or so?
I think awareness is the easiest and the biggest thing we can do. The more people that know about it, the more people that are talking about it, the more expertise and skill sets and backgrounds we can call upon to make a change. I always say, like, this is something that I find really special about the trips that I do is you never know the background of the person. And it might be someone that doesn't think that what they do is relevant to conservation. And in fact, everything is the way people think, their background linked to technology or linked to legal, like legislation, or linked to banking and finance. Like there is always a connecting point. And I think that if people, even simple things like resharing on Instagram, doing a
Yes.
school presentation about pandas, or, going into the office and talking about rhinos. I mean, it's an interesting topic in itself, but the more people that are aware, I think then we can make a conscious effort to try and do good. And, I don't think it's necessarily one huge change. Of course, we can talk about things like change in legal structures, which is definitely needed. We can talk about funding into technology, which is needed. But in terms of an individual, everyone's small effort will come together and it will create a big impact. So I think awareness is like the trigger, and then what will come from that will be what benefits wildlife.
Yeah,
I completely agree with that.
yeah, same with me. Yeah. So, if you could leave our listeners with just one piece of advice to help make a difference, what would it be?
I would say don't think about it, just do it. And in whatever way you can, whether it's, as I said, sharing a post on Instagram, whether it's listening to this podcast, whether it's coming on one of my Wild Tracks trips, I think that people should just stop thinking about it, stop talking about it in the sense of what they want to do, and just do it. Because when you take that leap of faith, when you go on that trip, or when you talk to someone else about what you're interested in, whether it's conservation or just your passion in general, I think that we're on to making a positive change in the world.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think what we should do is spread awareness, which is why I decided to do an episode actually to spread awareness about endangered species conservation.
It's an amazing initiative, and both of you should be very proud of yourselves for this. And I hope that you get a lot of traction and a lot of other guests to speak.
We hope to do that. And but it's been such a valuable conversation. Thank you so much, Chloe, for sharing your insights and giving us hope and direction for this future.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to this episode of Saving Species. Don't forget to follow along with the podcast and check for new updates regularly.
And together we can play a role in saving species and protecting our planet. Until next time, take care.